Great. My thanks to the Suter Group for the excellent care and hosting which they have provided to me. The pillows in my room, so big and comfy and large, I could only get 2 of them in my suitcase. Delightful also to have my lovely wife with me. Sometimes after 30 years of crisscrossing the United States and having been in 1,000 organizations at this point in time, one gets a little sorry for oneself out on the road. And I called Stephanie one night and I said, "Darling, will you still love me when I'm old and gray?" And she said, "Yes, and I'll write to you wherever you are." Tonight, fortunately, she is with me. And I have the good fortune of being married to someone who's brighter than I am and better than I am. And little by little, she keeps trying to polish this old stone. It has been a great journey, a journey that I am nearing the end of a trail. I looked out over you this evening and got a little emotional, I must admit. There is 1,000 reasons here tonight. I can remember the days of 20 years ago when I was criticized for using the word customer. I can remember taking it in the ear when we talked about the need to manage differently and leadership, and that we needed to change words, and that we shouldn't call people employees, and that we shouldn't refer to administration, that what we're here to do is something at a higher level. And if you can't get the words right, you're never going to get the concepts right. And how over time this industry, wanting to do well and having great people in it, needed to adopt a new way of thinking about management. Here we have 21st century medicine that is exploding all around us, medical knowledge doubling every 60 months. In our lifetimes, we will live to see the cures for cancer and Alzheimer's. Nancy applauded by the large crowds in Washington. People crying out, "We love you." And what a lesson. We have a lot of work to do. And one of the things that we can say is that we have not had the kind of management or the utilization of people that this great science calls for. We have to become a cradling organization which allows this new knowledge to penetrate lives and bless lives. And tonight there's 1,000 people through the work of Quint, but not just through his work, it is your work. I said the word to myself silently this morning when he said, "What's right with healthcare?" And before he said, "You are," I was saying the same thing. And through you, literally tens of thousands of lives will be changed based on ideas you've picked up here, based on ideas that you've had of your own. And we are all interconnected. I was blessed in coming here, doubly blessed, not only the chance to see a great friend and a great champion of change in our industry that has symbolized something that all of us want to do, but I was housed in what is called the Truman Suite. We are in what is, I believe, was the old Muehlbach Hotel, this building, this actual structure, before the Marriott took it over. It is on the 18th floor of this building that President Truman took election results. Beth threw him out of the house because she didn't want all of his cigar-smoking buddies. And there are pictures of President Truman all over the walls with General Eisenhower and General Patton and Churchill. I remember reading the book Plain Speaking, a book I recommend to you. Plain Speaking, that's what Harry Truman was. People used to shout out, "Give him hell, Harry!" And he'd shoot right back and he'd say, "I just tell them the truth. That's what they think hell is." Historians now saying one of our greatest presidents was Harry Truman. Historians tonight saying President Reagan may also make that list. And one of the things that we admired about both men was that regardless of your political views, we liked the person. We saw a genuineness, something of the American character that we felt was our kind of guy. And we liked it. At age 28, I remember reading about Harry Truman. He'd been a captain in World War I and brought a bunch of boys from Missouri back home safely from that horrible conflict. A friend of his, he was selling suits in a men's store. Who would have thought a suit salesman would have been the guy that had to make a Hiroshima decision? Who would have thought that the star of Bedtime for Bonzo would turn the Russian nuclear missiles in another direction? Don't underestimate anybody on your staff. Don't underestimate what they have or what they could be. An old country song that I love, I'm just an old lump of coal, but I'm going to be a diamond someday. That's what Stephanie keeps telling me anyway. Well, one of his friends, as he sold suits, sold clothing goods down the street, he was Jewish, and the Ku Klux Klan of Missouri, active in those days, painted signs on the store. It being a small town, Harry knew who these clowns were, and he took his friend, and they went out at midnight to a Klan rally. Just he and his friend. No police, no National Guard, no, let's call the Attorney General. Just a person of courage, living a word on the bottom of this screen that talks about values and mission. And there they were with their flame fire going, not the kind of fire we're interested in, wearing their sheets. He said, Tom, I know who you are. Harry, I know who you are. You miserable. And then Harry knew how to use the English language in a way we wouldn't want to repeat here. What's your problem? And if you've got a problem with my friend, you've got to go through me. Do you have any questions? Ralph Waldo Emerson said that the test of greatness is how one meets the eternal every day. And on that day, Harry Truman passed the test. And a young man willing to fight for his values and to stand up and to speak plain was chosen by this country as its president. In 1948, with no political pressure, with no political support, he desegregated America's military. I said we're all connected. A young man seeing the president do that said, well, then maybe I can make a career there. Colin Powell, years later, recalled, who became the National Security Advisor to President Reagan, and who in the last 48 hours was successful in getting the French and the German to sign a unanimous declaration to support us in Iraq. And I asked myself last night, what if Harry at age 28 hadn't passed the test? Today is a day of celebration as we think about great people and as we think about what is happening here. All of you have great responsibilities. I'll tell you, every single one of you is going to have a bigger one. You're going to have a bigger job, and one of your jobs is you've got some competitors in your town or in your region, and that you not only have to make your organization a great place and a better place and a more competitive organization and more excellent, but you have to set an example for those other hospitals, and then there'll be 2,000 people here at this conference. And we catch, hopefully, a spark. Quint is overly kind. Let me just say this about being a spark, or hopefully trying to set a fire. It takes a lot of fuel. And boy, did Quint have fuel. I can remember one day the people in charge of socialization in our effort to try to make some organization change happen at Holy Cross, and they decided, let's have all the executives stand up at the front, and we'll have a cheer-off. And who can get us to cheer more loudly than any other person? And there was Sister Jolene. I remember Sister Jolene, and she was a great lady, and she had real doubts about making organization change. And she came up to me and said after our first session, Clay, I'm going to have to pray to the Lord Jesus about this. And I'm not Catholic, but I know that you're in big trouble when they're referencing the Almighty about judging your program. And she came up to me the next time and she said, "It's okay," he said, "it's all right." And I said, would you write out a statement, because it'd make a great marketing piece, you know? And everyone tried to cheer, and they did a good job. And then, I don't know where this guy came from. It was the loudest voice I have ever heard in my life. I thought you were going to never be able to speak again after that. Thank God he found out about amplifiers and speakers and things. And I said to Mark, "Who is this guy?" And you could just see the amount of fuel that was in there. I could see it then, Quint. God love you. The story is told about a young man. He was age 11. He had a father who was not happy with the public school system, so he went out and got a tutor for his son. He got a 21-year-old young man to teach his son. His teacher was a fellow by the name of Aristotle. How'd you like to have Aristotle teach your kids? Aristotle had a teacher himself. He had been taught by a man by the name of Plato, and the discussion between Plato's Republic, and the contrary points of view, or the alternate or the other spins of the ideas that came in Aristotle's thinking, became basically the formation of the Democratic and Republican parties. It became the U.S. Constitution. You owe that pretty much to Plato, and the amendments to the Constitution, and the first one being freedom of speech, you owe to Aristotle. And Plato had a teacher in turn. As we go back, we're all connected. And that teacher was Socrates, and Socrates never wrote a book. As far as we know, there's nothing recorded. We would know nothing at all about Socrates except for this young boy, Plato. And Plato saw Socrates abused by the state for speaking his mind, and was told, "Socrates, if you do not recant, if you do not take back what you have said, then the state is going to put you to death." How scared would you be to be one young man, and this was your mentor, and now they were going to put him to death? And Socrates said, "I would rather drink the hemlock than to alter the truth." And he did. And Plato thought long about how a state should be organized and wrote a book. And then his student Aristotle, and then to Aristotle's student Alexander. The Romans years later would refer to him as Alexander the Great. When Alexander's father died because he had been murdered, and Alexander was 16 years of age, the generals who were responsible for his father's safety came to him and offered them their sword. He could take their life. They had let the king die. But he remembered a lesson. And one day in a math lesson with Aristotle, he said, "How many is one?" And there are lots of ways in which you can answer that question. I suppose you could say it's a prime number, it's an integer. But thinking about who this young man was supposed to be in time and what his potential was, he taught him that in human affairs, one can be a very great many. How many are you? And now you're 16. Your dad is dead. Here is the sword. And he said to the generals, "I want you to serve me faithfully as you have served my father." And in 16 years, they conquered the world. You are a mighty army. You are not one, you are 1,000. You are not one, you are tens of thousands. There are impacts, there are ripples that are going out from all of us. Do not underestimate your task. We have heard way too much about what is wrong with American health care, and sure enough, there are problems, and that's great, because there's a reason for you to show up tomorrow at work. You know, if there wasn't any problems, who would need you? We live now in Arizona, and there the casino gambling revenue is all in the hands of the Native American tribes. And we had a referendum there this last fall, and I had the opportunity of hearing the chief of the Hopi speak, and he told us this story of a Native American, an Indian, who was lying on the ground encountered by a cowboy riding along on his horse. The cowboy sees the Native American on the ground, reins in his horse, and the Indian lying there begins speaking and says, wagon drawn by horses, 2 horses, 1 dapple gray, 1 palomino, passengers in wagon, 2 passengers, 1 man, 1 woman, woman wearing blue calico gown, man driving. And the cowboy said, that's astonishing. You mean you can tell all of that just by listening with your ear to the ground? And Indian says, no, they run over me half hour ago. Well, if you've been feeling a little run over, I can understand that. Now get up and take your pity city moment and get over it. Now I got to burn some material here. I'm going to do it real quick. I'm going to give you 5 headlines of what I call the uncommon leader. In World War II, when half of the Pacific Fleet was wiped out in one morning at Pearl Harbor, things did not look good. There was real concern about invasion along the California coast or Oregon, and people didn't know what was going to happen, and we were in serious difficulty. There wasn't anybody to bail us out. It was us or nothing. It was do or die time. It was stand up and be counted. It was salute the flag and say, pass the ammunition, brother. This is the real deal. And we were fortunate, and we had a fellow by the name of Admiral Bull Halsey. And Bull Halsey waited on the backside of Midway Island, and thank God for poor electronics in those days. They couldn't see him because of bad weather, and cloud cover helped us, and they came steaming down the east side of Midway, and he was on the west side waiting for him with what was left, outnumbered ship-wise 6-1. And Bull Halsey caught him at the Battle of Midway and evened the score. Now we're back in the game. When Bull Halsey came back to New York and ticker tape parades and so on, and the government wanting to showcase him and buck people up and give us a moment of morale boost, they talked to him about what a great man he was, what a great man you are, what a hero you are, and he stopped all of that talk. He said, I am not a hero. I am not a great man. There are no great men. There are only common men forced by circumstances to greatness. And right now you say you've got tough times. These are your circumstances. And this then is your moment of greatness. Make no mistake that this is your day of testing. Now, when I have had the opportunity to read over the years, and I've read so much and learned so much from so many people, when I've observed in my own practice with organizations, there are real characteristics that distinguish men and women who stand out from the crowd, and I'd like to distinguish for those headlines for you quickly. And the first headline about people who are uncommon leaders, who consistently play over their head, who don't know they can't do it, that are so stupid they just go out and try again, is that they know who they are and they know what they're worth. Now, I remember in college, I had a college roommate, and he was sure full of himself. And he'd get up in the morning, look at himself in the mirror, and say, Clay, I can hardly wait to get up tomorrow. And I'd say, why is that, Ken? He said, because I get better looking every day. I don't know that we need that kind of ego. I suspect a lot of you don't think you are that much. I don't think that you preen. I don't think that you ask others to obey you. But somewhere inside of you there is a feeling that you're supposed to be here. You have a feeling that, why, maybe you could make a buck somewhere else selling Avon or who knows what, that you'd rather be in this game, that you feel somehow valued or needed. I don't know what your apprehension or what your feeling about it is, but I've talked to so many of these uncommon leaders, and they're in this game because they want to be. They're in this game because they know it's the best darn game in town. I mean, I'm sure the Dixie Cup Company makes a great product, but would you like to go spend 30 years making Dixie Cups? Or wouldn't you rather have the mess of a situation you've got and try to make a dent in that? Alfred North Whitehead put it this way, one of our greatest educational philosophers, that a great society is a society in which men and women think greatly of their leadership functions. You have a greatness that is your opportunity to create. Nobody's going to give it to you, but you can create it. It's right there. It's waiting for you. A second headline is that they serve the customer. Come hell, come high water, or come policy. We are going to do what these people need regardless. I remember reading the words of Marshall Field, "The customer is king," he wrote. John Wanamaker said something that is on the list of phrases that people who've never read a book on business can recite for you. And that is, the customer is always right. And so we hear from these giants, and they have these simple, clear-cut pictures. And then we walk into so many organizations, and instead of encountering that wonderful philosophy, we instead encounter a clerk jerk. The organizations are rife in America that are more interested in having customers conform to whatever their limitations are of the moment than they are interested in performing what it is customers require. Consider this quotation. Institutions that can no longer provide their customers with a product they want to buy at a price they want to pay for it have lost the right to survive. It is the judgment of the marketplace and of the customers for whom we all compete. Do you know who said that? Edward R. Telling. He was the last successful CEO of Sears Roebuck. Last year, Sears sold $41 billion worth of product. And it's a pretty good store in many respects. But they kind of lost their way, didn't they? Number one on the Fortune 500 is Walmart, which last year sold $245 billion, 6 times the size. What is the quotation from their current CEO? Walmart's mission is simple. Satisfy customers by providing them with quality merchandise at affordable, say that with me please, affordable prices. Our objective, are you ready for this? Is to roll back every price we currently charge. Their purchasing departments have told their suppliers the day of the price increase is over. Now, you have an interesting problem if you're Rubbermaid or General Electric or anybody else that wants to sell through the largest retailer in the world. You can either try to send them an invoice that costs more and lose the business of the greatest distribution channel the world has ever seen, or you can figure out how to refine your work processes. Make the decision. Now, we've gone through the phase of let's be wonderful in our service, let's be great in our relationships, let's be caring in our communication, let's do our rounds. All of that is good stuff, ought to stay in place. Everything that Quinn has written about, I totally endorse, but he and I have a similar understanding. There's more than just one pillar on this building. And the customer is saying to us 2 messages very loud and clear. Watch the quality, will you? And watch the cost, because even though it may be worth everything in the world to save my child, I just don't have the money. I don't have it. It's not that you're not worth it. Lee Iacocca said to all of his suppliers when he was president of Chrysler, I'd be happy to do business with you next year at 5% less per part. And we're not hammering you. We're not forcing you. It's not that kind of a lack of thinking. We'll show you how to streamline work processes. We'll batch our orders different. We'll refine the paperwork. But we've got to get the cost down. That means you've got to get your cost down. And we're going to do that, by the way, next year and the following year. We'll be happy to do business with you again for 5% less. And we're going to carry out that plan, suppliers, for the next 10 years. And 10 years from today, we want you to be providing us every single part at 50% of what you're charging us now. And that's exactly what happened. Every day in Phoenix, in my hometown, we have busloads of people, older folks, getting on and riding that bus to Mexico to buy their prescriptions at a third the cost of what they're going to spend at Walgreens. Do you think the AARP might be on our side if we said to Big Pharma, we'll be happy to do business with you next year at this percentage less? Do you think you're going to get political support around that one? Oh, yes, indeed. Now, that's a whole big battle we're going to fight one day. So the sooner the better. Because I'm here to serve my customer, and that's what they told me to do. And it doesn't have to make any sense to me, and I don't care whether Eli Lilly likes it. Who's the boss? That's what we're going to do. Our objective, says Walmart, is simple. Roll back every single price. Wow. Can it be done? Clay, there's so many reasons why it can't be done. Well, you didn't go to the kind of organizations I've been involved with. All things are possible to him that believeth. Because I see a miracle in front of me tonight. I know that's true. I remember coming to this outfit, this show tonight. I thought, well, I need a new outfit. And Stephanie took me down. She said, let's get you a new jacket. And this is my nice new jacket. And we had a nice selling experience. It was professionally done. And then we got to the point where Stephanie said, perhaps you should have a tie. Maybe we should accessorize. And I said, well, what did you have in mind? And she said, well, perhaps that one over there. And the fellow goes and gets the tie, and it's an Italian silk-painted job, $89. And I said, from the Midwest, wondering if you might have something slightly less expensive than a tie. Brings me a cravat. We're now down to $76. I said, I think I'm not getting through in my communications. I'd like to see something really cheap. Guy hands me a mirror. Well, I don't want to start any fires here tonight, Quint, but I'm telling you, when the customer says jump on this price thing, I'm stupid enough to say, okay. So now how are we going to do it? Don't know. Didn't know how we were going to get a person on the moon either, but this country figured it out. So if we can do that, and if Jonas Salk can figure out how to solve polio, I'm sure we can deal with hey, folks, you all balance your checkbooks. I'm sure we can find some way to do this. I sure am not going to wait around for the government to give us national health insurance because I'm not going to live that long. So it's a radical new delivery model. And if you believe that serving the customer and that you, in fact, have a mission to play as part of what's going on here, then you may be an uncommon leader. And the third headline would be that we have to release the power in people. I've never seen a successful leader who didn't find some way to magnify the brain power, the motivation, the morale, the willingness to serve of the staff who are there. I see it on the sports pages every day. Some losing team, lose. You don't get rid of the team, you get yourself a new coach. We had the occasion when we lived in Chicago of seeing Phil Jackson and the Chicago Bulls, 6 national championships. He goes to L.A., national championships. What's the difference? Difference of coaching. If you haven't read Phil's book, you might want to read it. It's called Sacred Hoops. He believes that playing basketball is a religious experience. The values are in everything, whether you see them or not. The prime drivers of people wanting to do right and to make something happen in their life are there, whether you see them or not. When you do the rounds, when you are more interested than interesting, as someone said today, People respond and do a little better and a little better. And as everyone does a little better, your business does a lot better. There's no magic in any of this. I remember working for the city of Provo, Utah, when I went to Brigham Young University. They were so silly, they gave me a degree there. And we used to go out in the springtime and clear the irrigation ditches. You get runoff from the mountain, and the mountain snows would melt, and down would come the water for the farmers. And we had to clear those irrigation ditches. And we had one of these old-time straw bosses who was our boss, and he would come around and check up on how we were doing and remind us of his power and authority over us. And he'd say, "I'm the boss, you're nothing. I'm the boss, you're nothing." And under our breath, we'd say, "Big deal, boss over nothing." One of the buzzwords of management today is that of intellectual capital. The fact is this, it's a good set of concepts. I endorse them. Intellectual capital is the precursor of financial capital. If you want to make money, you have to make mind money first. And from these ideas, we have actually tracked, and some of the folks here tonight have done this kind of work, and found that the average idea, if you averaged across all ideas that people will submit and implement, will have a value ranging somewhere between $2,000 to $4,000. And if you take a kind of a low median of that, of around $2,500, it means that if you need $1 million, how many, show me the money. How many millions do you need? Because if you need $1 million, it's going to take you 400 implemented ideas. Sears Roebuck, other organizations, actually trying to turn around and making some good moves late in the game for them to be doing it, but they're getting with it. And there's always hope, there's always tomorrow. It's called the resurrection story, you know? You need $1 million, you need 400 ideas. Well, if you need 2 million, how many ideas would that be? And if you needed 3 million, it would be 1,200. Now, how many ideas could we get? We got 1,000 people here. Let's say that we were Our Lady of the Wallet, all right? And we're all working for the same healthcare organization, and we needed $3 million. Why we'd need then 1,200 ideas, but 1,000 people can only give you 1,200 ideas. How many could they give you? So we started trying this out. We said, what about one implemented idea per person? Every client we tried it with was able to do it in 12 months. Not just turn an idea in, implement the idea. Well, then we said, well, how about 2? This is called the WAG system of management, wild ass guess. So we tried. You can put it in the computer system, and then it's SWAG, scientific wild ass guess, okay? And every client that we asked to do 2 implemented ideas in a year could do it. That means that you and I could do 2,000 implemented ideas. And then we had a client that said, well, if everybody else has done 2, we think we're better than most hospitals out there. We're going to do 3. And then that became our new norm. And how many Disney does 12, Toyota does 26. Take 26 times the number of people in your shop. You want to get a number? You want to see where the money is? They're not going to mail it to you from Medicare. You're going to earn it the old-fashioned way, okay? You're going to listen to your people. I'll tell you, it absolutely amazed me when I would go into organizations and sit in the cafeteria and I'd say, what needs fixing around here? And anybody would say, well, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. Well, have you told management about these things? No. Why not? They don't want to hear it. And they paid me to listen to their people. And they could have had all this for free. In a knowledge-exploding world of science and technology, we are an applied science business. We must learn how to harness the minds. We're not paying them just for muscle motions per hour. If you believe that, you're an uncommon leader. 4th and 5th headlines more quickly. I want you to act like you own the place. We all have our psychological dynamics, how to get over our fear of authority figures. We live in an authoritarian, to some degree, organization. Doctor knows best. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes we have something to say, and we ought to speak up and say it. And There's some 80-year-old who had a stroke last night, and she can't speak. Who's going to speak for her? There's some newborn in your NICU who may not make it through the night. Who's going to speak? This is your hospital. If your boss doesn't like it, you know something? Your respect is worth more than your boss's opinion. Now, some of you are very, very skilled. You know how to do this. You know how to finesse relationships. You know how to be non-pugnacious about it. I'm not that way. I'm kind of like a defensive lineman. I'm going to be right down your nose guard. That's not the best way to do things, as my wife continually reminds me. Daniel Hudson Burnham put it this way: make no small plans, dream no small dreams. Ronald Reagan, quoted today, I wrote it down, said this in his second inaugural: America is too great a country to limit itself to small dreams. We had a request once from a poor county hospital in Texas. It was a border town. They were flat out of cash. They couldn't afford to do what we would normally have charged. It was a political mess. The board was a scandal in the paper. The CEO was being fired. There was labor unrest. This was a hospital that half of its clients were people who were coming across the border. Whatever the problems of healthcare in this country, it's a whole lot better than a whole lot of places. You can be a Saudi Arabian prince. You get yourself in trouble, you're flying to the U.S. So I said to my staff, in my ignorance and in my stuntedness of spirit, I said, oh, I'm not really interested in taking them on as a client. I just don't hear the music. You'll have to forgive me for that. And then came in the newspaper article. Now there were customers who had been served by this place, poor people, carrying signs asking for the reinstatement of this embattled CEO. He'd been a Peace Corps volunteer. He was half Native American and half Hispanic, wore his hair in a pigtail, a remarkable person. And here was a picture on page 1 of the paper of an 80-year-old grandmother being interviewed, carrying a sign for the reinstatement of this leader, calling him a warrior angel. And Stephanie shoved it in my face and said, are you hearing the music now? I said, yes. Get with the program, Clay. When you act like you own the place, then it doesn't matter because we are in a battle royal. These are the only ones, Teddy Roosevelt said, that are worth fighting. We need great men and women to do that, and if you think that way, you're an uncommon leader. And lastly, the uncommon leaders do what they do with excellence. A bestseller in Japan, a book entitled The Great American Disease. Following World War II, the Japanese became very duplicative and imitative of our society. They admired our dress, our music, our success, our business and industry. Biggest mistake we ever made with the Japanese was giving Edwards Deming a passport to go over there and teach him quality control. They were students, and if we said it was so, then that's what they would do. And they trusted that. They admired us. Even though we had been a great enemy, they also recognized a winner when they saw one. And The Great American Disease was a book that said they've forgotten what they talked about. They have fallen away. They are destroying their families. They are making stuff that's mediocre. The old study now, still being quoted, 98,000 people will die. 1.3 million people injured. It's not a downer message, but every one of those lives affected is an eloquent argument to make change. We're told by those who can estimate these things that the damage of all of that disastrous quality is $9 billion. If you took 5,000 hospitals and divided it, it means each of your places would get about $1.8 million. You can buy an awful lot of training for a 1.8 mil. We know the standardized protocols, information technology is the way we've got to go. We're way, way behind other industries. It was announced by the government that in 10 years we'll have a computerized universal patient care record. 10 years? We won World War II in 48 months. This ain't that big a problem. Sorry, I don't mean to throw any lighter fluid on your sparks. The Scripture says that a characteristic of God Himself or herself, I'm covering myself either way these days, is that of righteous indignation and anger. I think a little of that ought to go in the mix. And I think we can do it with love for the people, but with real judgment about the problem. Let's get real tough and hard-nosed about it. I remember collecting at one point a lot of sayings, funny sayings that would appear on tombstones, and one of my favorite was the one that appeared in Highland Park Cemetery in London. And the cemetery stone reads, "I told you I was sick." Robert Townsend, in his excellent book called Up the Organization, put it this way: if you don't do it excellently, don't do it at all. Because if it's not excellent, it won't be fun. If it's not profitable, it won't be fun. And if you're not in business for fun or profit, what are you doing here? So do it because it's not only the right thing to do, but it's a lot of fun to fix these things and to walk away and say, "Do you see our numbers then? Do you see our numbers now? We did that." Something called pride. Years ago, Russell Conway wrote a great story called Acres of Diamonds. It was the story of a poor dirt farmer in Africa, and he had so many stones and rocks on his farm that he couldn't grow anything very well. And in a dream, he had a vision that there was a great, beautiful farm with a river running through it and green acreage, and he would maybe go in search of this farm. And he spent 30 years of his life searching all over trying to find this beautiful farm and never did, and came home finally to die. And his farm was bought by the De Beers Diamond Company. And Russell Conway's message was that what you think are the problems are in fact just diamonds in the rough, and they need your work, and there isn't some better place. How many is one? How many are you? God love you.
Thank you very much. Oh, watch out. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.